Michael Gove has been on the BBC to talk about whether the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were at odds over how to tackle the cost of living emergency. It's a deadly serious topic, literally deadly for some, but not for Gove, who seemed to think it called for comedy.
We are constantly looking at ideas in order to ensure that we relieve the pressure on people who are facing incredibly tough times. But that doesn't amount to an emergency budget, which is what some people immediately thought that it did. It is an example of some commentators chasing their own tails and trying to take a statement that is commonsensical, turning it into a major capital letters, a big news story. And in fact, when the Treasury quite rightly say, calm down, then people, instead of recognizing that they've overinflated the story in the first place, then say, oh, this is clearly a split.
Now, I'm not averse to deploying silly voices every now and again, but I probably wouldn't do it when answering a serious question about the cost of living crisis, especially if it was a crisis I was personally responsible for. I presume, though, Gove resorted to comedy impersonations because he didn't have much else to offer. Across the morning news shows, he was also asked about the Tory manifesto pledge to build 300,000 new houses, about more measures to deal with the cost of living emergency, and whether the government would remove VAT on energy bills, just as he promised to do before the Brexit referendum. His answers were all riffs on the same theme.
So will 300,000 new homes be built this year?
I don't think we're going to hit that target this year. But
within the next couple of years, because by the middle of the decade was the manifesto promise.
We're going to do everything we can.
You made a pledge. You made a pledge on housing supply. Are you going to meet it by the middle of the decade?
Well, we're going to do everything we can, but it's no kind of success simply to hit a target if the homes that are built are shoddy, in the wrong place, don't have the infrastructure required, and are not contributing to beautiful communities.
We heard from the Prime Minister yesterday saying he will say more in the days to come on how to help people with the cost of living. And then almost immediately, the Treasury is saying there'll be no emergency budget and we'll set out the budget timetable in the usual way. So who's right? Is there going to be an emergency budget or not?
They're both right. And no, there won't be an emergency budget.
Now that we have got Brexit done, elected British politicians can do something. Yes. Why don't you do it and remove VAT on energy bills?
I'd love to remove VAT on energy bills, but a more effective way, an even more effective way of helping those who are poorest is by targeting support through the council tax system that goes to those who are most in need.
It's not an either-or, Michael
Gove.
And
of course, when we are in a position to, when the public finances are stronger, then we can take other steps in order to reduce
energy bills. People are going to wonder why, when you are in the position to do it, you have decided not to do it.
Do you think we need an emergency budget? Do we need to review the lift in corporation tax? Or do we need to cut VAT? Mr. Gove?
No, no, no.
That last clip sums this government up perfectly. No, no, no. No to help for the poorest, no to decent housing, and no to any intervention at all in a crisis that's only just beginning to ruin countless lives. The other theme there was broken promises. The Tory manifesto promised 300,000 homes a year. Now it's just an arbitrary target. It doesn't really matter. Gove also promised during the Brexit referendum that it would mean VAT off energy bills. Now energy is more expensive than ever. Well, meh, who cares about that policy anyway? Dahlia, with that prospectus on offer, if that's all you had to tell the public when you went on the morning shows, would you resort to silly accents?
The contempt, the way that he scoffed when he said emergency really just tells us everything we need to know about his attitude here. I'd love to know what Michael Gove considers to be an emergency, if not the fact that we are experiencing the steepest drop in real-term wages since records began, or the fact that prices are increasing by 8%, or the fact that energy bills are going up by 54%, or the fact that food banks are having to ration what they give to people in food parcels because demand is so high. Or I don't know, the fact that 1.3 million people are going to be pushed into absolute poverty. So not relative poverty, but absolute poverty. What about any of that doesn't scream to Gove that there is an emergency? But of course, the reality is that for him and for others like him, there's no emergency at all. In fact, the corporate sector, including in retail, which is where many people's purses are being really tightened, many of those same sectors have boasted of very high profits throughout this crisis. And in many cases, we are being put through this hell specifically to protect the profits of big business. So actually, our suffering is inherently connected to the success and the profiteering of some of these big companies. You know, the CEO of BP actually thanked the lift on energy cap and on energy price caps on the basis that it turned BP into a cash machine. So whilst our pensioners, our working class people are being ground into poverty in order to protect oil and gas companies, literally being left out in the cold in order to protect those companies from the rise in oil prices, that is the world of Michael Gove. That is the world that he sees his job to be, is to protect that world. So for him, there is no emergency. You know, there's no crisis. This is business as usual. This is business as is desirable. The government actively attacking our standard of living, not by just not intervening, but actually by actively intervening in favor of the corporate sector at the expense of everyday working class people, all while passing this off as an inevitable crisis with inevitable consequences that no one could have seen coming. And as for the broken promises, these were never really sincere promises to begin with. When a quarter of Tory MPs are private landlords, it's not in your interest to build comprehensive, fair social housing. It's not in your interest to stop the exploitation of tenants because you're the one doing the exploiting. You know, I think we often talk about inequality as if it's, oh, just some people happen to be rich and some people happen to be poor, and we should have, you know, more initiatives to help those people who just happen to be poor. No. The way the system is designed is that the enrichment and the protection of the profits of the very rich, of the very powerful, of the people that Michael Gove sees as his peers, as his comrades, as it were, their enrichment relies directly on us not being given the things that we are entitled to as people who make this country run with our labor, and also as people who deserve, whatever their circumstances is, deserve in the 21st century to have adequate housing, adequate heating, adequate nutrition without having to worry about their budget being so squeezed that they have to pick from one of the three. So we have to see inequality as a deeply interconnected system rather than just sort of two separate worlds that are happening independently of one another.
One thing that really frustrates me, and you know, regular viewers of this show will know, I get particularly passionate when it comes to housing, mainly just because I'm incredibly resentful of my landlord. But the policy platform that Michael Gove went into the levelling up department, levelling up in housing, the idea there was he's an incredibly clever man. He's going to be able to fix the problem and apply his quick thinking to Britain's housing crisis. I mean, people from basically all parties recognise there aren't enough homes in this country. We need more homes so that maybe, possibly, people my age could afford to buy a house instead of renting forever. Or, heaven forbid, there'd be enough council homes for everyone. But the right's answer has been to say, look, what we need to do is we need to cut regulation. Then the market will come in and the market will build all of these homes. The promise from the government was that there would be 300,000 homes a year. Michael Gove went into that department specifically to do that, specifically to work out which regulations could be changed so that these houses can get built. It was a lot about the planning system. It was an idea to try and limit the ability of NIMBYs, not in my backyards, to object to new developments. They were going to fast track them. Then what happened is Tory backbenchers, Tory MPs, as you say, Dahlia, a quarter of them are landlords, said, oh, actually, we don't want to fast-track development because actually the housing shortage benefits us because a shortage of houses means we get to charge higher rents for them. And also, all we really care about is that the houses we already own maintain their values. We don't really care about having houses for other people to live in. What we care about is the ones that we own keep their gorgeous views, right? So the argument from the right, we can only do this by deregulating and through the free market. That was Michael Gove's plan. We're going to do 300,000 homes a year. He realizes actually there's so many vested interests that that's completely impossible to do. They'd probably be shitty homes at incredibly high rent anyway. So he's just like, oh, actually, no. Oh, maybe we won't build the houses. What he should do is do what the left have been saying the whole time, which is if you want to build 300,000 homes a year, by the way, I'd make it a lot higher. If you want to build 500,000 homes a year, you can't leave it to the market. Whatever tweaks you make to the regulatory system, unless you get the state in there to build high quality council homes for everyone, then we're going to have this same crisis where we've got landlords who are exploiting people, sort of serving a parasitic role in society where you have to work half of your hours to pay someone who does nothing but sit on their butt. As Dahlia says, a quarter of Tory MPs sit in that category. A lot of Labour MPs as well. Too many Labour MPs, in fact. So this is Michael Gove trying out the right-wing option of getting new houses, failing, and instead of going to the left-wing option, which is let's actually build some council homes, saying, sorry, maybe we don't need the houses anyway.